Alright folks, Benjamin here. I'm going to show what I did for a Lexus LS400 1998 starter replace. So I've already got it all back together, did my test drive and all the other business, but I'm going to go over some things that I wish some other videos would have covered. So in order to get to the starter of this particular car, there's a lot of things that have to get removed. The main component that has to get removed is the intake plenum right here. I will tell you it weighs probably 30 to 40 pounds, so keep that in mind. And there's a lot of other side components that have to come off. So when you do this, first things first is label everything. Okay, you see I had stickers on all this stuff. I mean, yeah, most of the stuff is going to be able to go back together. But labels do two things, because if you see a label that's kind of out of place, and that's going to tell you either A, you didn't connect it back up, or B, it fell off. But in any event, the components that I had to take off in order to replace the starter, obviously, was the intake plenum here. But all this mess here, disconnect the brake booster vacuum line, this stuff with the, whatever this evaporator purge crap. Had to disconnect the plastic wire harness plastic here. That's attached to the plenum. These components were all taken off. I disconnected that. I disconnected all of the connectors to all of the injectors, because the injectors on this car are mounted into the intake plenum. So you have to disconnect all the electrical wires for the injectors. I also disconnected all the wires, or I'm sorry, all the wire harnesses for the spark plugs. You have to disconnect all the stuff for the throttle position sensor. Some wire that goes down there somewhere, I don't know where. Have to disconnect the pedal position sensor. You got to remove the intake box here, disconnect all those lines, and the same thing on this side. So there's 10 bolts that have to be removed in order to get this piece off. Oh, and then also you disconnect the fuel line. I'm sorry you can't see it, low light, but you have to disconnect the fuel line right here. This bolt right here, the smaller of the two, is 14 millimeter, and I just used a channel lock to do that. And it is a good idea to do that very, very slowly. Have something under it to catch the fuel, because it's going to be in there, as well as, given that the tank of this car is located in between the back seat and the trunk, it's going to gravity feed. It's not going to stop dripping. So that in mind, open up your gas tank cover and undo your filler cap to relieve the air, so that way if it's hot or anything like that, gas doesn't get pushed out, because that happened. Anyway, you don't have to separate them, but it certainly makes it easier to do that. Is the throttle body here. I am disconnected. There's 4 bolts here. These are 12 millimeter, and all the bolts that you use to take the intake plenum off, those are all 12 millimeters as well. There's 3 socket sizes you're going to be working with: 10 millimeters, 12 millimeters, and 14. Anyways, once you get all the electrical wires disconnected and pulled off to the side, then you'll start working. You'll take all this stuff on the back here, the heater hoses and things like that, and you'll be able to pull it all off. When you put it back on, you'll notice that the intake plenum, because of the PVC system, the PCV system here, sucks all the oil in. I also took the liberty to make sure, one, that the fuel injectors were clean, and number 2, I used half a roll of paper towels to clean out all of the valves. Clean out all of the air chambers to get rid of all the muck. I know it's going to build back up again, but boy, I tell you, it's idled so much better since I did that. Well, we'll see tomorrow too, because I just got done maybe an hour ago. Anyway, there's some torque specs online, but I'll tell you that the starter is going to be 27 foot-pounds. The intake plenum is going to be 13 foot-pounds. The throttle body is also going to be 13 foot-pounds. And while you're at it, you might as well, when you replace the intake plenum, when you get ready to put the intake plenum back on after everything's cleaned out, is order your gaskets. So hopefully you're watching this video before you're doing it. but get new intake plenum gaskets. Replace all those. There's also a water bypass valve on the back. I'm sorry you can't see it, but anyways, there's a water bypass valve. That's what it's called. Do yourself a favor, and if you don't replace the gaskets for the intake plenum, you're going to have to replace those gaskets for the water bypass. They're Fel-Pro 35941. I'll say that again, Fel-Pro 35941. You're going to need 2 of them. I also replaced, there's a gasket in between the throttle body and the intake plenum here. That's about $7. Get that. I don't know what the number is, but get it. But anyways, an overall thing, I'm happy I did it. I finally got it done. I've been dragging my feet for the last year and a half about doing it, but it's done. And the original starter, besides the typical click, 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 because the contacts are bad, but also the bearing, the thrust bearing had fell apart. So every now and then the Bendix wouldn't pull itself all the way back in, and it would sit there and grind. But yeah, it makes so much better. But total job time for me, just because I was working on it, took about 4 days. But I was working on it after work, 2 or 3 hours of crack, and then some major time on Sunday doing that. But once I put everything back together on Sunday, for the exception of a couple things today. And total time putting it back together for me, the amateur, was about 8 hours. So keep that in mind. Other than that, also take the time to go over your hoses. You'll see that there's some red ones here. Yeah, they're kind of cool looking, but for love of God, don't buy this shit from China. Please get real stuff. I mean, spend the money. Get the ones that are $3, $4, because this is your car, okay? This is your means of transportation. Get $20, $30, whatever it is, of hoses, and start replacing the hoses. So all the red ones were ones I replaced, just because that was the color of the size that I got. And then the next thing is this exhaust gas crap, whatever, this evaporator, purge, canister thing, those are fitting to get replaced too. Anyway, if you have any questions, leave them, post, all the other good stuff. Thanks.